welcome everybody online and in person. I'm sure we'll have more people coming in both online and in person as we get going, but it's my pleasure as always to at least introduce our speakers for the weekly Social Justice Research Seminar. And this week, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce my friend Olivia Lee, who is also, as well as being a researcher here at USC, is also the director of the doctoral program. And she's going to be talking about the effect of employment insecurity on mental health and alcohol problems. So I will get out of your way and let you take it over.
All righty. Okay, so since it looks a little cozy, I may even sit down and talk a little cozy way instead of me standing. So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. And my name is Olivia Lee. As Ellie said, I'm really excited for folks are here. And then have a conversation about employment insecurity and the substance use and mental health. So what I'm going to do is that essentially kind of pick and choose from multiple papers, either published or ongoing. But the theme is that the impact of employment insecurity and substance use. And one of the key things that we are kind of wrestling with is the impact of receiving unemployment benefit, unemployment insurance benefit, and whether or not that it has any influence in the relationship between employment insecurity and substance use and mental health. So that's the main thing. Okay. So what I'm gonna talk about is, if this one isn't working. Okay, it's not working, so you need to send out. Here we go. Hold on, looks like I have a little bit of technical issues. 1 second. Maybe I want to use it better. Okay, here we go.
There you go.
So so I wanna, that the work that I'm doing, obviously I cannot do alone. And I have a lot of incredibly capable and much smarter than myself. So they're with a team, and I put all the photo, including someone we know who's sitting right there, Nicole, is a part of the team. And the many people, but I'm very proud of our team, and I really cannot do anything without my team. And a little bit of background. So the first one that I want to talk about is employment insecurity. So employment insecurity is the first thing is that what is employment insecurity means. When we are thinking about employment insecurity, there's two elements. One is unemployment. Probably a lot of folks have thought about that one. The other one is underemployment. And unemployment, we know we lost a job. So I don't have a job. That is unemployment. Underemployment is you have a job, but you do not have optimal job. So that it can come in there's everything else in academia, there's a multiple definition about what underemployment means, and everybody argue back and forth and everything. But at the end of the day, there's three main elements. The first one is you want to have a full-time job, but you cannot have a full-time job. So that's the one, underemployment. It called it as a hour-based underemployment. And the second one is you have a job, but you are making at poverty or below level. That is income-based underemployment. And the third one is you are overqualified. So you have a job, but your credential and all of those is really you are overqualified for the job. Those are the main domains of underemployment. And today, what we're going to talk about is mainly time-based, hour-based, the underemployment. And as you can see, January 2025, we have a lot of people are either lost their job or underemployed. 6.8 million Americans were unemployed. So last month, and 4.5 million Americans were working part-time for economic reason. This one is the labor statistic definition. They are defined as hour-based underemployment. They call that one working part-time for economic reasons. So there's underemployed folks. So if we just purely kind of combining those two, you can tell we have a good substantial proportion of Americans that are struggling with employment insecurity. And then employment insecurity has been connected. Technology has been my main thing here, obviously. And employment insecurity has been connected with behavioral health. The first one is mental health. So mental health is depression and anxiety. And also it has been connected to suicide as well, the employment insecurity one. The other one is the employment insecurity can escalate the substance use. And the substance use, a wide range of substance use is alcohol and the smoking and cannabis and also other opioid use and whole thing, whole like the bunch of the substance use problem that has been connected as well. So then, so employment insecurity has an impact on the behavioral health. So then why we are here, why am I presenting in a whole thing? And what we are going to talk about is what has not been known. Yes, we know there is a relationship between employment insecurity and the substance use and the mental health. What is not known? So the first element that we are arguing, our team is arguing, is that employment status is not static. So meaning it's a constant transition in and out, especially when you have economically, we have a like macroeconomic turn, like up and down and the whole thing. People's employment status is really up and down and whole kind of stuff. But a lot of studies, we treat employment status as a static. And then we compare someone who has a job, who does not have a job, and see who is better, who is not doing better in terms of mental health and substance use. And that is a problematic. And the second one is unanswered question is underemployment. Underemployment has been overlooked, including my own work. I have been the focus on unemployment quite a long time. Underemployment is my reason, the interest in this notion of underemployment. And I'm not the only one, this is a recent one to many of those. So that we gotta focus on underemployment. And we need to know whether or not underemployed folks are similar to unemployed folks, or they're similar to folks who actually have a job. So that's the part. And the third one is unemployment benefit. There is a conceptually people argue that when I lose my job or when I experience employment insecurity, if I have an unemployment benefit, so meaning is there's some support, that potentially the impact of EI, employment insecurity on the behavioral health can be maybe a bit better. There's a conceptually argued, but people have not really tested one. So we don't know whether one of that is really true. And the final one is which groups, who suffer the most. That one is really important from our perspective as a social work perspective. We gotta see where the disparity happens. And then if we know certain groups suffer more in terms of the EI, employment insecurity, and their substance use and mental health, the compromise more, then we gotta channel our resources toward the group so that we can prevent the health disparity and health inequality and mental health and substance use due to the employment status. So with that, to deal with those questions, we're gonna use the COVID data. And I will talk about that one, what is the one, which specific data set and holding down the road, but we're gonna focus on the COVID period. And I wanna explain why. We're gonna explain the focus on COVID period. If you're looking at over here, this is a COVID pandemic era. As you can see, this one is from the labor statistic, US Bureau labor statistic. As you can see, it's skyrocketed. And as you can see, there's a lot of dynamic movement is happening since like skyrocketed up and coming down and a little kind of the swing back up here. But there's a very dynamic transition. We'll have that one in that period. The other one is around the time we had a pandemic unemployment assistance, which is different from the regular unemployment benefit, unemployment insurance, because around that time, the folks who are underemployed were eligible to receive unemployment benefit, which is not the case in our usual day. So right now, they're not eligible to receive unemployment benefit. So this give us, open up the window to examine the role of this unemployment benefit piece in relation to underemployed folks, and also really dynamic economic transition. The employment status like a transition is happening. So that's a really good point for us to leverage that. So what we are trying to do exactly is using that, focusing on the COVID data. And this is what we're trying to do, address each element that we say we have not on the answer the questions. The first one is our tendency of employment to see the employment status as a static. What we're going to do is a deploying modeling strategy to really model that transition, the dynamic nature of the transition employment status and the individual variation. One thing that I did not mention is that difference between intra-individual differences versus intra-individual differences. Just for the sake of our student colleague, I want to make a comment about that one. So inter-individual differences, you are looking at the differences between two people. So someone, let's say that Olivia lost job. So Olivia compared to Jeff has a job, then we compare these two. That is the inter-individual differences versus intra-individual differences. What is Olivia's transition in terms of one? What is Jeff's transition of that one? That is an intra-individual variation, and that's what we're going to model. And the second one is underemployment that has been overlooked. So now, okay, it has been overlooked. Let's bring that one to the main stage and really understand what is the impact of underemployment in for the mental health and substance use. And the third one is unemployment benefit. As I mentioned, the one that the PUA, the pandemic unemployment assistance, we're going to leverage around that time so that we can understand the impact of unemployment insurance and which groups suffer more. We're going to empirically test and see that identify those groups that have been identified in the health disparity literature and saying that these are the groups that are likely suffer more. We're going to empirically test whether or not we see any differences in that. So the method, the data is coming from the data called as Understanding America Study in the UAS. This is a nationally representative sample, and some of us have been using this one. But the UAS is adult sample, so the age 18 and above. And sample size, that COVID era, it was most like 9,000, but it's currently is increasing. The number is constantly increasing, and right now I think around the 10,000. That is the sample size. And around the COVID time, if we had intensive longitudinal survey, meaning it's from March 2022 and March 2021, I missed the one part, a bi-weekly survey. So every 2 weeks, there is a national survey about that one. This is substance use and mental health and employment status and whole thing. And from April 2021 to the June 2022, there's a monthly. So still, it's a pretty intensive survey, especially if you think that this one is a national data. We are gonna focus on this wave, and a total is 24 waves. The reason why we're focused on this wave is because when we're working on the data analysis, that's the data we're ready. And now we're extending that period. And we're going to have much more complicated employment status variable, which Nicole knows and have heard about that one whole operationalization. But anyhow, today, the study, this is the data period that we're going to focus on. And it measures the employment insecurity and unemployment benefit. The first two studies is using this definition. The first one is a secure employment. So essentially you are working for 35 hours, more than 35 hours. That is definition of a full-time job. And underemployment, and you are experiencing essentially the reduction in your working hours, even if you don't want to. That is underemployment. And unemployment, we have two different layers. One is unemployment with a benefit, and the other one is unemployment without benefit. And then in terms of that health disparity element, these are the one we're going to focus on. The first one is race and ethnicity. And then the second was a sex assigned at birth. And the third one is education level. And the final one is the depressive symptoms before the pandemic. And as I said, the findings, this is a selective finding. I kind of pick and choose from 3 different papers. So let me go from each one. So the first one, before going to the first one, I mentioned at the beginning, employment status is dynamic. It is not a static. And as you can see, that is what is happening. As one would expect, it is diagonal. That one is there's no movement. You're like a securely employed before, and next time T+1, you are still securely employed. So that's the transition. And underemployed, you were underemployed before, and you're still underemployed. So that is a diagonal. So that is a big chunk. So you can see, which we would expect. But at the same time, this other off diagonal force, they are substantial element as well. That's the one we want to know what it is, and I want to kind of bring this transition up instead of like comparing the inter-individual differences. So the first study is done by Haumia, my colleague Haumia, who is at the UK. And this one is a relationship, looking at the relationship between the change in the employment insecurity, employment status, and the mental health. I'm going to bring that one as an example, as a depression as an example. And depression is defined, operationalized using a PHQ, patient health questionnaire. A lot of us have heard that one, PHQ. And this is the finding, and I need my note because it's a complicated, a lot of number, and I want to make sure that I don't forget what I want to say here. So the first one is I want us to focus on the black and bold, like this, and the second one like that. So the way that we read this one is you're moving from securely employed to underemployed, then you are gonna have a experience increase in depression. So that is a one. And when you move the securely employed to the unemployed without benefit, then you experience that the increase in your depression. Okay. And down here, unemployed, you're moving from unemployed, no benefit, and staying in that status, then you're gonna have the impact on increase the depression, the score. That will be the findings that you will see. So that's the transition. So the moral of the story is that downward movement has an impact on the depression. It will increase your depression score. So that's the main point. And then the other one, the second one that I want us to pay attention is a blue, this chunk of a blue part. If you see that when this is a p-value, and we know that they are not statistically significant. And this is not statistically significant, and it has a meaning to me, at least. So if I connect the one over here, securely employed to the underemployed, what I see over here, what this one is telling me is after you move from secure employment, securely employed to the underemployed, that underemployment status moving, either staying or further downward movement has no impact. Meaning is underemployed versus unemployed, there's no differences, which is we have missed a lot in the previous literature because we lump underemployed with a securely employed. That was our previous practice a lot. And you can tell that is wrong even from here. Securely employed versus underemployed, they're different. Underemployed, that status, it has more the negative impact on the depression. Okay, watch out my time. And then now I want to bring our attention to red one. So red one, underemployed, moving from underemployed to the securely employed. That was not statistically significant. And then unemployed with a benefit to the securely employed, same thing, even if it's a negative. So it may decrease your depression score, but it says it's not statistically significant. And over here, unemployed without benefit, and the securely employed still, it was not statistically significant. So moving from to the better, the employment status, somehow it has no impact on your depression. So one end, people may argue, does it mean that employment status is not a causal? If it is a causal, if I move that creditor side, then shouldn't I see the impact right away on outcome? That is one argument, which is called as a social selection in the health of the disparity related field. But on the other hand, one element that I want to put it out there is that there is a concept of a scarring effect. I don't know how many of us are familiar with the scarring effect, but our employment shock. There is a literature showing that when you experience the employment shock, it leaves the individual. It takes a while for you to overcome whatever shock that you have. So for example, I had myself and my colleagues had a paper, which was looking at the impact of employment insecurity experience at age 21 and your mental health and substance use experience, like that's the status, in age 33. That is long time, that is a scarring effect. Even if, and they did not experience any employment like a fluctuation of between that time or whatsoever. But what we found is there is indeed a scarring effect. What you experience at age 21, the employment status, a shock that may impact on after whatever it is, 13 years, you may still have that experience. Which one is right? That is, so we gotta study out. But at the moment, my argument is that we are looking at, because this is transition, like when you're making that transition, what happens with your mental health and substance use? What I'm gonna argue what we argued in the discussion, this is published paper. What we argued in the one is the possibility of scarring effect. There might be a possibility of social selection, but there is a possibility of a scarring effect. That was what we talked about. Okay. So there was a depression, another one is mentioned the demographic group, whether or not there's some differences happening. And where we see is the differences happening, ignore this male part for a second, but what we see is this group. That's, you can see Hispanic folks. And another one is that the bachelor, the degree, the folks who have bachelor degree. If you have a bachelor degree or higher, then you will be more protected. That's what it means. And over here, if you are the Hispanic folks, if you belong to that ethnic group, then the impact of movement between from a securely employed to the unemployed with no benefit, that will be exacerbated for you. So the impact will be stronger. So here you can interpret this one is if I flip the coefficient, what it means, if you do not have if you are a high school dropout, example, then the impact of unemployed and without benefit and staying unemployed without benefit, that will be exacerbated. So that's where the health disparity part coming along. Here, you can see the moving from unemployed and no benefit to the underemployed, presumably improvement in the employment status. That one, it was actually the kind of fighting against you the before in the manifest model. If you're male, that impact may be needed. This is a puzzle to me, and I don't have a clear explanation yet. And we're wrestling with what this really meaning and whole kind of stuff. And I'd love to hear anybody has their thoughts. Okay, so Eric, how much time I have?
Well, we have until 12:45 for the entire session, so you've got 20 minutes. You can either keep going on or take questions whenever you feel it.
Okay.
Do you want me to give you like a 10-minute warning so you can take questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah, probably I'll be done, but if I need to stop right now, then I can stop right now.
No, you can keep going.
Okay.
Sure.
So the next one is, so far we talk about the depression. Next one, we want to talk about binge drinking. Binge drinking is one of the substance use, the problematic substance use. And this is a definition. It's NIAAA and NIDA, everybody's definition. This one is for the binge drinking. And we use that one and see what is the impact of those. And again, these are a lot of numbers, and each number is speaking a different tones to me, so I want to make sure that I have that one. So let's start with in the same way. The first one is moving. Yeah, the focusing on this the bold one. So you can see unemployed with a benefit. If you move unemployed with a benefit to the unemployed without benefit, and then unemployed stay unemployed without benefit to the unemployed without benefit, then you are gonna have increase in your binge drinking behavior. So that's what it is. And I want to make a note that this we have seen in the depression as well. So this one is telling us staying in the most vulnerable, the status for a long time. That is has an impact on both your mental health and the depression, that one in specifically, and the substance use, the binge drinking specifically in this case. And then blue, I want to talk about the blue one here. So this, the blue one is showing the impact of a benefit in here, unemployment. So we are moving unemployed with a benefit to the unemployed with a benefit. You're saying that, right? And then unemployed with a benefit, unemployed without benefit. If you stay unemployed, the same, the vulnerable status, but with a benefit, that's not going to increase your insurance. But if you're unemployed and you move to the without benefit status, that's going to increase your benefit, the increase your the binge drinking problem. So it shows the impact of having a benefit in there. And the red one is the same thing. Moving underemployed to securely employed does not give me anything. And moving unemployed with a benefit to the securely employed does not give me anything. The same idea, unemployed without benefit, securely employed, that is the most secure employment status. And this one is the least secure employment status. That movement does not show it. Even if it goes to negative, it was not statistically significant. So the same puzzle between the social selection possibility versus the scarring effect, the possibility that stays in there, which we will tackle with that one. The other one that I want to mention is this one. Unemployed with a benefit, moving back to the underemployed. So from an employment the security perspective, underemployed, that is more secure the status compared to unemployed with a benefit, because this person does not have a job. But as you can see, this transition actually increase the substance use problem. If we juxtapose that, we move that one. That over here, the unemployed with a benefit moving to the underemployed for the depression, it does not help them. So there's something about this underemployed, a little more the puzzling status, especially in relation to substance use, especially alcohol, the example that I present to you. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna move, Eric, yeah.
Do you really believe that underemployment is more secure than being unemployed with
That is
benefits?
a good question, right?
I would argue that it's not.
Mm,
Because being underemployed can oftentimes be the sorts of things that you do either as part-time employment or gig work, wherein the income is it's low and it's unstable,
mhm.
right? Whereas at least with unemployment with benefits, there is a stability to the expectation of what your I mean, the income may be low, and it would be very interesting to know what the actual income is. Because if the income is exactly the same, then one might think that it's the actual uncertainty of how you're going to get that income that's really at play.
Mhm.
But if the income is actually lower, even though it is an entry into the job market, it's a lousy entry into the job market.
Mhm.
And I mean, if it's truly an entry into the job market in which the income is higher, then your puzzle makes sense. But if it's either of those other two situations, then And I would argue from what I know of sort of in my own anecdotal life of looking at people that are underemployed, the lack of income and the instability are both huge sources of stress, which could lead to the sort of self-medicating behavior of binge drink.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and maybe depression is a I would argue that depression relative to binge drinking probably has a longer time horizon for change, right? Like if you're depressed and you get a job, it may take you longer to get not depressed as a result of the stability that having a job has. But moving from one situation to another with respect to binge drinking seems much more subject to the situational stressors potentially.
Yeah.
I mean,
Potentially.
barring like, active substance abuse, in which case it's going to be stable, right? But I mean, so long as you've got some sort of, and probably most people that are binge drinking are not active substance abusers. They're just engaging in unhealthy behaviors, in a short-term time window, right? So I mean, it's really, I don't know. I would give a very different interpretation to that.
That is lovely because we did having the conversation about that one as well, and the stress level and the underemployed, what types of job, I said, you mentioned that one, and the stress level versus unemployed, but you have with a benefit, so it's a predictable. Versus underemployed, yes, you move to the having a job, but at the same time, that itself is very insecure and unpredictable, unstable, that can create even more stress, and because of that, it maybe like leading to the binge drinking. So that all interpretation is gonna go into the discussion, but we're wrestling with it. As we all know, and as we share with our student colleague, whenever something counterintuitive thing is coming up, I'm gonna put myself in the camp that I do not agree with.
Totally.
And then bring it up and then making up an interpretation, bring the interpretation in the discussion and put on the stage and discuss it. Yes, it is a puzzle, like a social selection versus a social causation. I am more social causation camp, which is the impact, the movement in SES has an impact on health and substance use. Social selection is the other way around. Your health has been compromised anyway. You're drinking a lot because of that, you're going to lose your job. That is a social selection idea. So as a person who believes in the social the causation, always are trying to bring up the social selection in the main stage, which is in the discussion and talking about it. I love to hear Eric, your perspective about them really underemployed, their transition and underemployment status. Can we really call them one is a stable, more stable? Well, actually not. That is what we're going to be a part of the discussion.
Well, and one last comment. I mean, I think it's great that you're taking on underemployment as one of the major threads of your work, because I think that underemployment is more complicated in our modern economy than maybe even it used to be, right? So I think a lot of it used to be, oh, well, you have a part-time job or you have a job that's not of your skill set, but now we have this whole universe of these gig jobs, like, driving Uber kind of thing, right? And these are, very unstable in terms of their income generation for people that are working with them. I mean, some people, seem to perceive themselves to be big winners in these sorts of gig economies, and some people, are not. But there's a lot of people for whom, but it is inherently an uncertain income stream because there is no paycheck. There's no even if you work a fixed number of hours, you don't have a fixed payment that comes out of those fixed hours. And so, I mean, I think that there's a lot to be done in this space of it, because what underemployment means is in transition in our society.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of piggybacking what you're sharing, Eric, is that right now I have paid attention to, we talk about the hour-based underemployment, but as Nicole knows, and I see that some of my colleagues, Amy there too, but what we are doing among our team is moving to the next one, which is income-based underemployment. That is incredibly complicated to operationalize an income-based one. And that like really combining all of those, and I was like pulling my hair million different directions and make my colleagues pull their hair to million different directions as well. But I'm really excited because no one has the national level of data, underemployment, income-based underemployment measure across this long period of time. It will be, we are really excited to kind of go into that and even like disentangle more about this underemployed folks. Because some folks who we say you made you have a secure employment status, some of them will be the operationalized, categorized as folks who have income-based underemployment. So you may have a full-time job, but if you're making at or below poverty line, then it is not sustainable and a good job. And on that one, like tackling that question, that will come along. Okay, so I have I'm gonna skip this part, what I have. I wanna mention the one thing about what the Danny is doing, so another colleague. The Danny is doing, and this one is specifically focusing on underemployed folks. I'm gonna just quickly mention that what Danny is doing, and we'll open up that one. But this one is a little complicated. Each paper, as you all know, have complicated data analysis plan, a whole kind of thing. This one I actually need to mention so that we can make sense of what we are looking at here. So what Danny did essentially at each wave, making a kind of temporal distance between the point when folks made to have an underemployed their status and the depression. In this case is a depression. He's working on the substance use part right now, but the depression one, and about the 6 weeks differences. And then at each one, whatever the wave said, he did a propensity matching, which is the causal because of our discussion that I just mentioned, social causation, social selection. One of the key things is causality. So he did a propensity matching at that each pair, and then run the regression at each one, and then combine that one is using meta-analysis of lineage. So it's a kind of like all out of one, but that's a nutshell. So what we need to focus on is here, the red spot, and what the question that Danny has been tackling, wrestling with is whether or not receiving unemployment benefit as underemployed folks, that has positive impact, that helps for their depression. And the answer is yes. Because if you have received the unemployment benefit as underemployed folks, then it will decrease the depression, the scores for them. So with that one, I want to fully summarize the main point. The first one was that employment status is not static in the whole kind of thing, one. And our current answers and our current reflection is employment status is absolutely dynamic. And where you were before, that makes a difference. So that's the one. And underemployment and downward movement to underemployment has negative impact on behavioral health, especially mental health and depression in this case. And then third one is unemployment benefit, that absolutely matters. When we see that one, the movement, with unemployment, with without, we see the differences. And also among those who are underemployed, we see that having the unemployment benefit, that makes a difference. So unemployment insurance policy, we don't often think that this economic policy can actually function as a mental health and substance use policy. Our argument is right now is that unemployment insurance policy can be mental health and substance use policy. And that we're saying that is really important. And which groups suffer more? What we see so far is the Hispanic folks and folks with low education. So we got to channel that for that. Otherwise, this employment, especially right now, our employment rate is relatively lower compared to the COVID period, obviously. But economy always up and swing. So that means if we see another like spike in employment insecurity, the impact of that on the mental health and substance use will be bigger, exacerbated among Hispanic folks and the folks with a low education. The meaning is a disparity, health disparity will be exacerbated when the economy fluctuates big time. So those are what I have. And I don't know if anybody has a questions and comments.
– Thanks for indulging my questions and comments earlier. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
So I'm so glad you asked this one.
Are there any folks online that would like to ask Dr. Lee a question? Maybe raise your hand.
Jack?
Okay, can I ask an in-person question? So, earlier when we going through the depression part, I noticed that for people who are unemployed without benefit, and when they move to underemployed, the depression they also significantly predict higher
Yes.
depression. How did that?
That's the same puzzle, right?
All right.
Like how the one is gonna be that like the on surface, I thought the people would think on the spectrum of employment status, underemployed is better than not having a job
And no benefit.
without no benefit. But somehow that movement is actually not beneficial. Why? And that is the question that we are as a team are wrestling with in that one. And that's the question that Eric is sharing his thoughts on. Yeah, absolutely. If you have any thoughts, please share with the why it would be. Because it was a puzzling. When I saw it, well, what? Like that. But yeah.
It almost seems like, I mean, and I hate to say this as a quantitative researcher, but you need to do some good qualitative work with people that are underemployed and really get at, you know, what does it mean to you to be underemployed? Because I think my gut looking at these quantitative things is that being underemployed is more stressful than one might think. You know, and clearly, you know, maybe even more stressful than one might think relative to being unemployed, let alone relative to being
Right? Yeah.
stably employed, which is I think the thing that we would have less trouble, you know, understanding. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that is again emphasize our practice and my prior practice of lumping underemployed folks with the fully employed folks. That is just not a way to go. They're different. If anything, they're either similar to unemployed or worse.
And one suspicion I have is that maybe because that the data scattered during COVID period, that people who are unemployed are staying home, but people who are underemployed are doing the job that have interaction with people that could potentially result in like the risk of getting COVID. Was that?
So there's a period effect here that might need to be
Right,
disentangled.
that could be the case.
That's
interesting.
But it's just purely.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, and we can tackle them empirically because we have data.
Right.
We have data about the beyond the COVID wave, and that will be interesting one and see whether or not that holds true with a non-COVID wave. The part-time, that part we can do. Income-based one we cannot do because they don't have the data about the income-based one. But part-time, the one that we have over here, that one we can do. So really interesting one. At least a sensitivity analysis piece.
You have one online question, I think.
Sure, Lola.
Lola, we do not see your chat. We don't have the chat open here, so perhaps you could ask.
Please, I'm sorry.
Hi, no, that's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for having this. I look forward to it every week. And thank you very much for being here with this interesting topic. What I wonder is with the underemployed people, the types of skill that the labor for even things like Uber, but the types of skill is so low for the underemployed jobs, the part-time jobs that are available. You know, maybe they're just hustling and so doing things here and there. It seems to me that having an opportunity while receiving benefits to receive training for more skilled work has been lost in these past couple of decades. where if someone is unemployed, perhaps they have the opportunity to go for something that they enjoy, whether it be woodworking, interior design, working with my clients in my internship. I see that depression is higher because they've entered a market that's now falling, like retail. But when they look at things that they enjoy, like something towards the arts or something towards engineering, that seems to appeal to them more, and can, doing things that work towards that, even on a small bit level, like sharing your photography on a dedicated Instagram page kind of thing, to be the most simple, is an issue to look at. The low skill that's called for is pretty depressing.
Yeah, like I want to make sure that the kind of processing in my head, for some reason, the voice, maybe it was just me, I kind of like was pretty soft. But yeah, you're making like a really awesome point about the underemployed folks. And I think like that has been our main kind of reflection point, I think, among ourselves. And underemployed folks, all the skill set, Lola, as you mentioned that one, yes, it might be the skill, like the skill set they have are really low and whole kind of thing. But one thing that I want to emphasize, the operationalization that we have in here is purely hour-based. It does not, we have not taken into account skill-based, which is a third domain of underemployment. So I cannot kind of right away say that what it is and a whole kind of element. But the one of the element that the reflection point that you brought up, and which is really important, is that what is really going on? It's an underemployed, that status. And it's maybe it's a low skill, maybe that's it, versus unemployed folks that can have a more freedom to do, especially when they have with a benefit. We don't know yet, and maybe that is the case. But definitely that's the one thing that we can tackle with when we have data, and when we can operationalize a skill-based underemployment element that can be really helpful. That's an awesome point. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Lola.
Well, unfortunately, our time has come to an end. So maybe we can all put our hands together and thank Dr. Lee for a great presentation.